Okay, so I want to talk about the US caste system, okay? Because people know about the caste system in India, but there's actually a global caste system, and there is a US caste system. Really, it's basically like a North American caste system, but still, this US caste system, and I just want to do like a breakdown of it. Okay, so there is a prison caste in the US, okay, where these people are basically, you know, they're almost have this sort of prison heritage, right? Their parents were in and out of prison. Their grandparents may have even been in and out of prison, constantly almost this sort of prison lifestyle, right? And then there's basically these cities in the US where it's basically guaranteed you're going to be, you know, at some point you're going to be run through the prison industry, okay? Like it's kind of different from India where, India has these slums, okay? The US has slums too. They're just more replaced with prisons, and they they're more like polished slums, right? Basically these cities are basically like prisons anyways, right? Those are kind of just like outdoor prisons, free range prisons. I mean, a lot of cities in the US are basically like in the US are basically like free range prisoners, but it's really prominent in these. Basically, the US has slums. They're just polished, manicured slums, and prisons are basically replaced slums. But then there's these, prison casts, right, where these prisoners are basically used like batteries, right? Basically, our country basically actively terrorizes us with like these scary news stories and these policies, and sometimes politicians will play into it, like talking about this scary gang and that scary gang. Our own country terrorizes us so we can be complicit in this prison industry, because then there's so much money being, the prison guards, the prison warden, the prison contractors, bail bonds, all the companies that kind of spin off of the prison industry, the collection calls, um, you know, commissary, blankets, everything. There's industries upon industries kind of connected to the prisons. Okay, so there's essentially this prison caste, right? And that's why we have these weirdly like laws where like people can't vote if you're a prisoner, which violates all sorts of constant like legal and moral things. And you know, we we make it really hard to escape the prison system intentionally because it's profitable, essentially. Okay, and okay, and that's why like there's these arbitrary, you know, drug laws, right? You can be arrested in one state while someone's becoming a millionaire off of these different drugs in another state. Doesn't really make sense, but that's just to keep a steady supply of prisoners, right? Um, Even it's to the level our police don't really protect us. Like for things to be safer, all you would have to do is put more cameras and do cops have more heavily foot patrols, but they don't. Our own country is using us as crime bait. They want criminals, so to keep this sort of let's just say this punitive industry running, right? So that's sort of the prison cast, okay? Then we have, I would say that I don't have a term right now. I just call them the essential cast, right? Because the pandemic kind of revealed these essential workers, and most of these essential workers don't fall into these other castes, right? While at the same time, these essential workers are sort of, this essential caste is sort of looked down on, bullied, right? A lot of the essential caste is on welfare or their lower income, right? When, it shouldn't be the case, obviously, because clearly, if there's all these jobs, if they disappeared, they wouldn't, nothing really would be impacted societal wise, okay? And I feel like these essential caste people, they work the hardest, but they get paid the least. Like, a lot of you just simply don't really work. You either don't work or your jobs are very, very easy, or they're just unneeded, or they're just artificially made hard, essentially. Okay, so, that's the essential caste, right? Um, I would say they're like some of the most, well, I mean, these are almost levels of, well, let's continue. Okay, so the next caste is, you know, well, what I'm trying to say is, I don't, when I'm saying these castes, I don't really mean it in this hierarchical, like, in a victimhood way. Like, I don't believe prison caste people or essential caste people are exactly being exploited. I mean, in a sense, they're the most exploited, but you guys are sort of willingly being exploited, or you're being so shady and toxic that you're just maintaining the system. In the same way, it's kind of similar to, these toxic relationships, right? Like these prison and essential caste people, and maybe a bit of the farmer caste people, some of them, maybe, well, yeah, some, but there is, there, they're kind of like the woman typically in these stereotypical relationships, right? I don't think a woman is a victim in those sort of toxic relationships, even though society sort of frames it that way, typically, right? That woman is just addicted to this toxic relationship, and they're also like an antagonist in that toxic relationship. You know, it's that type of thing. Like, they seemingly seem exploited, but you can't be a victim in a voluntary consensual relationship, right? These women ignore thousands of red flags. That's what people in the prison and essential caste do. Like, just for a quick example, like voting for Kamala Harris, for example, um, who literally, who, so, put people in prison for smoking a plant that other people smoke, stuff like that, just because they look like you, or that type of thing, right? You ignore the tons of red flags. Even voting for these parties is ignoring. If you vote for Republican, you're ignoring tons of red flags. If you vote Democrat, you're ignoring tons of red flags, right? So they ignore red flags, but they're also toxic too, right? A lot of these women will hit the man. The woman's not a victim, okay? That's what I'm saying. But so the farmer caste, okay? Um, this is basically, so there's a farmer caste in the US, and you can kind of see this with different things, right? So there's so much, I mean, first off, a lot of you are just overpaid. You kind of frame the work as hard, but it's not that hard thanks to technology and that stuff. And you just kind of got a monopoly on these things. And I mean, there's some overlap with the appearance-based caste system too, because white caste people basically, you know, monopolize this farmer caste and that type of thing. But one example of the farmer caste is like, in the US, you may notice that there's milk in all of these things, even when it's like you don't know why in the world there's milk in it. Like there's like, why is there milk in this? That's the farmer caste, right? That's this sort of back room agreement or alliance, right? If milk is in everything, then that's more money for dairy farmers, right? That's like this. So artificially, it's artificially doing these activities to sort of boost your caste, right? It's just this shady caste activity, okay? And then there's like school lunches and that type of thing, right? So many people are lactose intolerant, so many people don't eat dairy, but you know, that's another way. Yet everything's so dairy heavy. That's like this farmer caste at work, right? And even just school lunches, like that's really the point of school, like so we could feed, you know, that's the prison caste too, right? You're just artificially creating these consumers, right? And but the other things about the farmer caste, there was this bill that was passed, and we're a spoiled, distracted society, so a lot of people didn't notice, but they passed this bill where the relatives of these farmers are given money. So imagine that you have a job, whatever job you work. Imagine if you work this job and your relatives, just because you work this job, your relatives are given $2,000, $3,000. They passed a bill for that. These it's we giving money to, if you are a farmer and you have cousins and relatives, we're giving them money. That's literally was the bill. That was like this farmer caste, um, backroom agreements. They're like, we want more money, and they're like, okay, we're gonna give you more money. Just keep voting for Republicans, that type of thing, right? So yeah, so people are literally sitting on their asses getting thousands of dollars just because they simply exist, I guess. And then the farmer caste has been romanticized, so we don't really look. But that's the farmer caste, right? So the next caste is this academia caste. Okay, so school, college is a pyramid scheme. Um, it is. Schools are basically like, if you look at these monarchical invasions, the first things they build is these modern monarchical invasions. The first thing they build is a church and a school, so sort of milk us, right? But more to create jobs for themselves, right? Current schooling, we don't really. It's not about education. It's not about learning. Everyone's so ignorant. We don't learn any practical, realistic skills or knowledge. It's a daycare for one. It's indoctrination, right? It's conditioning us to be like these compliant drones. But the biggest thing, it's just job creation, okay, for people with certain types of intelligences, right? I mean, the core of the academia caste is creating most teachers, but all these other jobs, right? What do they call them? Like deans, presidents, um, counselors, something like that. All these jobs are created. So at first, it sort of originated from these monarchical invaders, right? Um, they wanted jobs. The originators, people who originated from these monarchical invaders, right? Um, it's to create jobs for people, right? Teachers are romanticized, but teachers don't really. They're kind of like glorified babysitters. You guys don't really teach anything or anything useful, or it's just artificially extended, right? Like you could teach someone algebra in a few days, but then we learn algebra for years. doesn't, none of this makes sense. You know what I'm saying? So, but then there is this, I would say these other sort of institutions fall into this academia caste. So college is like this pyramid scheme, this job generating pyramid scheme, but to hide it, we have to create jobs for all these people with degrees, right? You sunk 5, 6, 7 years into getting these degrees. Imagine if you did that, but you can't get this high paying job. So we just create jobs for these degree holders. Okay, some are just like very literal, made out of thin air jobs. Like if you've ever been on like Craigslist and like see those little studies, like study this little study, like we're gonna track your this or that for 5 weeks. Those are just, they just created those jobs, right? For pointless, useless studies that they've already done. Those are to create jobs for people with degrees, right? Like one popular one is like, we're going to do a study to see if text messages. We're going to do a study to see if text messages remind someone to take their medication. First of all, that's just a duh study. Of course, if you get a text reminder to take a medication, you would more remember to take that medication. But they just fabricated that study, right? But they do that all around the world. They do that, and they keep doing the study. We already have the results, but I mean, it's a sham. But they hire people for degrees to run these studies and do these studies and that type of thing. Like that's one example. But then there is more other examples. Another way they do it is to overcomplicate everything, right? One way you can see this is with a lot of welfare programs, right? Why don't, like, wouldn't it just be easier to do basic income? Like, people are practically already getting a basic income. They just fragment it into all these pieces, right? Medicaid, Medicare, like Medicaid, WIC, EBT, that type of thing. Section 8. You could just give someone a basic income, but they overcomplicate it so and hide it in like these benevolent sort of structures, so you can just create all these jobs, right? Like you could just simplify all of these processes, but they overcomplicate it where you have to jump through all these hoops and hurdles and go through all these professionals to do it. That was another way they created jobs. Or they hide it under benevolent things like domestic abuse shelters don't make sense. It's like that's what homeless shelters are for, or there's no reason to use a domestic abuse shelter. Okay, you can just get a job, have a savings. Don't get in a relationship until if you have low self-esteem, stuff like that. They just created that. That's another way to create jobs for people with degrees, right? They were working in all these positions, getting $50, $60, $70, $80,000, and a lot of these jobs are just very easy. You don't really do much. But another thing they do is like museums. That's another sort of academia, casteist sort of thing. You notice how they keep making museums and they're free. First of all, they're not free. They're being funded with our taxpayer money. But they create all these museums that don't really have much value. They don't do anything, or you can just go on Google, search pictures, look at videos, do a virtual tour of something. I'm not saying they shouldn't exist, but they should be publicly funded completely. But they just create them so they can create jobs for people. Like, think of all the different professions in museums. Those that you need a degree for, that's the reason why. Okay, it's just to create jobs for people with degrees. But there's all those sorts of things where right? So again, it's college teachers, like college is doesn't make any sense, right? Everything should be a trade school, and a lot of these trades could be are artificially extended, right? Some things that say take 2 years can actually be done in like 3 months of teaching, and because these degrees, it's like college is basically learning like trivial factoids with no practical application. They force you to take classes that have nothing to do with your degree because those are teaching jobs. They need jobs for these degree holders. So, and then teaching, I don't know why you guys romanticize teaching. It's not like you call like fast food jobs and menial jobs. Being a teacher is some of the most menial jobs that you can have. You literally just parrot information over and over that people could just Google. Like history teachers make no sense whatsoever. How do you teach history? It's just objective facts. So you just read it and then you know it. But there's all these history teachers. And then what about, so you learned about early ancient Greece. What about it? Which is just like speculation and fan fiction and guessing and that type of thing. Like that's another thing. It's like creating these like learning about dinosaurs. That's I'm not saying people shouldn't do that, but that should be it's totally recreational. There's no practical application of it. There's no benefit from a kid seeing a dinosaur bone in a museum. It's just all to create jobs for people with hypologic intelligence, mostly, primarily, okay, or very high social intelligence. Um, okay, but that's like the academia caste, okay. And then there's the armed caste in the U.S., okay. This armed caste, or sometimes I call it the defense caste, the armed caste, the military caste, but because I would include like cops in that too. So I would just maybe call it the defense. Let's call it the armed caste, okay? Because this armed caste is, I mean, and this is by like the most, I'm going it from the most draining caste to the least draining caste, right? Like the prison caste is the least draining, right? Of course, but there's the armed caste, right? This is the military industrial complex, but also law enforcement, border patrol, ICE, you know, all this different SWAT, all those types of things. Okay, so first of all, we already see this warmongering complex. Like the U.S. intentionally instigated that war in Ukraine so we could, profit off of it. War profiteering, right? We lied about weapons of mass destruction so we could go to war because it's just very profitable, and we have to hide these. We have to justify these manufactured job positions, right? There's so many high-paying jobs within the military. If there's no more war, we're going to have to fire these people. Okay, that type of thing. So we instigate wars all around the world. We'll blow up a wedding on accident because then we get to buy more missiles, right? There's so many sort of companies and industries that spin off of this military industrial complex, right? And then there's also other aspects of this sort of defense cast, like it's basically like a basic income for jocks. Really, is the military. Like so many people sit at bases and they don't really do anything. Like kids are being slaughtered in schools in the U.S. Like what if we put armed guards in there, but you're busy in Japan watching Netflix, eating fast food, doing pointless menial jobs type of thing. Like we have over 800 bases in the world, and they mostly just make us more they make us more vulnerable, or they just have no real use except for justifying the military industrial complex, right? And of course, there's other sinister elements to that, right? Again, our own country terrorizes us, so to just so everything's scary, we must fight this and we must fight that, right? Like ISIS was pretty much a manufactured boogeyman, right? ISIS was like the equivalent of a street gang that never attacked us once, um, but us sort of exaggerating them into this big villain justified a lot of these things, right? Um, so yeah, it's basically a basic income for jocks, for men, and like even here in bases, there's so many people who just sit at bases. You don't do anything at all, really. Like during the pandemic, people were working. There was people at bases. I mean, sometimes you guys murder people, like in Killeen, Texas. Um, but you don't do anything. You just sit at bases and you get checks every 2 weeks. Pretty much, I guess. Um, and then there's like a North Korea level of propaganda here. Well, it's larger, right? All of this has to be hidden, right? So they use. It's not a coincidence that there's so many TV shows about cops and the military romanticizing us in a glamorized way, when we're more like we're the terrorists in reality, right? But you have to hide that it has no real purpose, and it's a lot of you just sit on your asses pretty much. Um, yeah, it's self propaganda. It's like those military people coming home videos. That's just propaganda. Who cares? You basically took a vacation. Like, where are the coming home videos for truckers? They can be away for all this time. Like for loggers, for fishermen, they could be gone for 3 months and then come back. Like, it just makes no sense. But that's like the more military aspect of it. But it's the same thing for like law enforcement, right? Like there should be like a boots on the ground approach. You guys mostly, it depends on income, right? You'll do drive-bys in richer neighborhoods, but you always usually come after the fact. You guys don't really do a lot, or you just instigate and manufacture crime, right? But then even a lot of these other people don't do a lot either. You just SWAT, FBI, all these defense arms, very overpaid, very do minimal. Like you see like time after time, like a school mass shooter, they were reported to these different agencies and organizations, didn't do anything. I think there was some person who like blew up like an RV or a truck somewhere, and I guess they were broadcasting on a megaphone, "I'm gonna blow up this truck." They were reported. These agencies didn't do anything. You guys don't really do much. And like the biggest thing of that is like 9/11, right? I mean, that was pretty much intentional. They knew that that was going to happen, but again, that would justify the military, this defense cast sort of constantly trying to make us have trauma bonds with them, right? They're trying to always initiate these trauma bonds. They show us something scary, and then they show themselves in this sort of glamorized light, and then we kind of attach to them. That's what, like, they had intel that 9/11 was going to happen, but they just let it happen. I mean, this is like public knowledge. I don't have. There's a court case where this is admitted, and we're so distracted we don't really care. But, or, I mean, I'll get to that part. But, right. But still, if we look at 9/11, it's like, what was the defense budget when you let that happen? What was the point of having that high defense budget if you just let these attacks happen? Like, you don't actually protect us. You're kind of lame. you actually endanger us, right? Like a lot of these terrorists were just people defending themselves. Like we didn't have a lot of problem with Muslims in these different countries and people until we started invading them and murdering them. And I guess we got mad that they retaliated, I guess. Yeah. Anyways, but that's the sort of military caste or this defense caste, right? And a lot of these castes are sort of intertwined, right? So the armed caste is intertwined with the prison caste, right? Pumping these people into prison. But the biggest one to me is what's interesting is this armed caste, and then right, the farmer caste is mixed with the armed caste is mixed with the farmer caste because then you can do these shipping food to them and that type of thing. And then I want to touch on the academia caste again, right? So you people like in the essential and prison caste, let's use truckers as an example. So did you have to pay for your trucker school, right? Thousands and thousands of dollars, right? While look at the people who go through in the academia caste. Our taxpayer money gives them free education, right? Pell Grants, thousands of dollars free, thousands and thousands of dollars free, and then our taxpayer money fund these loans that they take out, and then they go to college and do pointless activities or that they pretend is hard, classes that are pointless, artificially extended, that type of thing, while having tons of fun as well. And then, they get this pretty much free education, and then they have all these programs that can forgive their loans, working with this organization, becoming a teacher. So they basically got all this free money while you paid, and then they get this job that's not even an essential job, while you have an essential job, actually hard, actually dangerous, and then you have to pay thousands of dollars for your school, while these academic castes neglect or look down on you. Like, what? And then, you have these loan forgiveness, right? So your loans, you basically went to school for free. That's just one example, but that's the kind of stuff that happens with this academia castes, okay? And then, but the biggest sort of alliance between castes is this armed caste and academia caste. But what makes it interesting is that this academia. A lot of liberals concentrate in this academia caste, and a lot of Republicans concentrate in this armed caste. But there's right in our face this very deep alliance, right? So if you go up to the military, you can go to college for free. You don't have to take entrance exams, tests like that type of thing. Coddling men, per usual. Well, everyone's coddled, but still, they make college. The only reason they make college free for this armed caste people is so they can. That's money for the academia caste. So Democrats and Republicans are one party. They're basically like that toxic couple, right? Have you seen that toxic couple? They talk crap about each other, they abuse each other, but they refuse to break up. That's the one thing. They're a unit. It's just performative. You guys perform that you hate and dislike each other, and that type of thing, because your sort of caste statuses are intrinsically dependent on each other, right? So much money is pumped into the armed caste, and that money is pumped into the academia caste. Like, it's as if you really hate your ally. If you did, you wouldn't live next to them. You wouldn't watch movies starring them. This is just all performative. In that same way, person's like, I hate my husband, I hate my wife, they're this, they're that, but you guys refuse to break up. Yeah, sure. But then the last caste is this entertainer caste, okay? And, and I just put this, clergy caste within that, because that's basically what religion has become. If it's not always what it was, it's just entertainment, right? You go to a church and it's basically a concert, and it's doing the same thing that these movies and TV shows do, right? All of these TV shows and movies and songs, they just flatter us, coddle us, tell us we're great, we're perfect, no matter what toxic behavior we do. That's what these priests and clergy do as well. You're great no matter what you do. You're great no matter what you do. Just believe in Jesus or say shalom, this, that, and the fourth, right? But then there's also overlap with, entertainment, literal entertainment. Like, celebrities, famous people are in this entertainment cast as well. Politicians are just entertainers, right? They're there to just entertain us, to distract us, to tell us we're great, to provide us escapism, to justify our toxic behavior, right? I put politicians in that entertainer cast, performers like, singers, actors, that type of thing, and clergy. It's an entertainment cast, okay? And that's what they do. They entertain us, they distract us, they flatter us, and we give them all of our money, right? They all use sort of the same schemes. Like, they terrorize us, say that we should be dependent on them, we have a trauma bond with them, right? Some Catholic church burned down, you guys gave all of your money to them. Meanwhile, there's a hurricane that destroyed a whole city and people are homeless. But forget giving them money. Let's give billions of dollars to rebuild this church, even though that Catholic church is sitting on tens of billions of dollars. Like, that was one of the dumbest things I've ever seen. I'm sorry. Like, you guys totally made me, what's that word? Sober to religion then. I was like, hell no. Like, why did you give money to the Catholic Church? They have tons of money. That was just, I rarely want to use the word dumb, but that was just dumb. I mean, like, those homeless epidemics and this type of thing. Like, what the hell? Like, but that's the entertainer cast for you, right? But those are the caste system. That's the U.S. caste system, right? These overpaid actors, these overpaid politicians that don't do anything. Politicians don't do anything. All of this is practically automated at this point. It's automated. They don't do anything. Their jobs are very, very easy, and then it's just intentionally overcomplicated so they can have a job. Like, tell me, list what politicians do and tell me the hard parts. What's hard about it? This is an automated system. It's kind of like how Twitter fired all those employees and it still worked. Politicians provide bells and whistles and window dressing. That's it. And then they just entertain us, right? And now it's like, it's not even good anymore. Like how you guys act like dismayed at things or angry about things, like you're performing and you're not delivering anymore. Like, be quiet. But then, clergy, these sort of priests and preachers in mansions, multiple mansions, regurgitating information, right? You see that they all have very high social intelligence. They all have high charisma. Clergy, politicians, and literal entertainers like actors, singers, that type of thing. They're just manipulating us with their charisma, right? And like Trump is a big example of that. Trump has like this super charisma. We're just charmed and mesmerized by this person who's doesn't like most of his base, right? Just exploiting people, right? And that's the biggest thing. It's like, but that's the thing is like we I think we all kind of know this caste system exists, but some of us are so many in the positions of this caste system that we don't really care, I guess, right? We're all just performing for ourselves. Because I said, what did I say? Like, our own country is terrorizing us. No, we're terrorizing ourselves. We're gaslighting ourselves into this system. Even though we hate this caste system and all the things, it's so toxic, it produces so much toxic behavior, right? Like, people don't like being mugged, but you're doing things to maintain people to being mugged. We actively create criminals, but I mean, I guess we're kind of addicted to gambling, right? We actively create criminals to pump them through these various caste systems, but don't let it be me. Maybe it won't be me. We're all gambling within this system, okay? We don't want to change anything because we're in these various castes. I mean, but it's kind of off that people in the like the essential caste and prison caste are seemingly being exploited the most. So I don't know why you guys would want to maintain this caste system, but we do. And the only thing I can say to that, I guess, it's some type of. I mean, I'm not exactly sure. Only that I don't know. Some of it is a higher concentration of being illogical, lower logical intelligence. You guys don't realize that this is happening, and there's this sense that you guys, this is the best that we can do, type of thing, right? Like watching you guys eat this like toxic fast food. You think that's the best that you can do? Like I don't know, and then I guess there's like a heavier trauma bond towards you. I guess I don't know, but well I know, but yeah, I'm not getting into that. Um, like a lot of people in the prison caste are comfortable in the prison caste. It's not a big deal to you. You like it. A lot of people like being in prison. People like having, what do you call those? Probation officers. It feels like you have a parent or something. And henceforth and so forth. Okay, but yeah. We terrorize ourselves because we're addicted to the caste system while simultaneously being repulsed by the caste system. But that's the caste system, the U.S. caste system, okay? And yeah, just a bit more on the entertainer caste. Like you could see that when during the pandemic, all these you couldn't work, all these businesses were being shut down, but entertainment was one that was okay to keep running. Like making movies. Why? That's essential to our lives. It's essential to keep us constantly distracted and to keep this propaganda up and indoctrinating ourselves. We're essentially gaslighting ourselves, pushing ourselves that this is okay when